Hong Kong's parliament will, in effect, cease to have any opposition. That's when the resignations of 15 pro-democracy lawmakers come into force. They resigned some 2 weeks back to protest a law passed by Beijing that gives the government the right to expel lawmakers without due process. The resignations mean the city's pro-Beijing administration will be able to pass laws without even a murmur of protest. Lawmakers say they had no other option but to quit. But for many, like Siu Ka-chun, it will mean not being able to do work that is vital for many in the city.
For Hong Kong opposition lawmaker Siu Ka-chun, his last week in public office is all about prison visits. He's going to meet the first man charged under the national security law imposed in July.
I believe he still has to be in custody for a year or so before he gets a hefty sentence. I was told he's having some personal problems, so I applied for a special official visit today to meet him in person.
Elected in 2016, Siu is the city's most prominent legislator fighting for prisoners' rights. He's made over 200 official visits during his 4-year term, and more than half of them to protest-related prisoners. As a council member, he gets to meet inmates in private for an hour each visit, in contrast to the regular 15-minute public visits. But with his term coming to an end soon, he will no longer enjoy such privilege.
I can no longer be on the front line. It will be a huge relief for the Correctional Services Department, as I can't put pressure on them anymore. It's a shame, as there's still so much I want to do. But I have to leave office to show solidarity with the democratic camp.
Hong Kong and oil! Together we stand!
Hong Kong's pro-democracy camp resigned en masse earlier this month in protest at the expulsion of 4 other lawmakers. Catalyst for the action was a Beijing resolution giving Hong Kong authorities power to unseat politicians without having to go through the city's courts. Siu Ka-chun is counting down his time in the parliament. Although he could see this day coming, it still came as a shock.
I never thought it would be so fast, so hard. We often say Xi Jinping is the new emperor, more ruthless and domineering than many leaders in the past, probably as bad as Mao Zedong. Now we see that he could even end one country, 2 systems in a blink of an eye.
After starting out as a social worker and university lecturer, Siu became one of the leading activists in the umbrella movement in 2014 and was sentenced to 8 months in jail last year as a legislator. It was a traumatic experience for him, but he still keeps his belongings from prison to remind himself of his mission.
In the past 4 years, becoming a lawmaker was the peak of my life. But then I was sent to prison, the lowest point of my life. It was so tough in there, and I had to find meaning of life by fighting for prisoners' rights. I told myself, I'm an undercover lawmaker in jail. I'm here as a prisoner for the checks on possible abuse by prison officers. I'm here to monitor the government.
Since the anti-government movement started in Hong Kong last year, over 10,000 people have been arrested. With the rise of a generation of political prisoners, Siu sees the pressing need to provide support for these young people and their families. He initiated a pen friend scheme earlier this year and has handled 6,000 letters so far. He plans to organize pre-jail workshops after he leaves the council.
Being in prison is losing freedom by having a lot of time. It is the same with leaving the Legislative Council. I will lose public resources, but in return have more time to focus on this particular issue. I don't know how far I can go with the fight on prisoners' rights, but I promise I will go as far as I can.
But what does the resignation of lawmakers like Siu Ka-chun mean for ordinary Hong Kongers? It's a question I'm going to put to 27-year-old Connor, who joins me on the line from Hong Kong. Now, Connor isn't my guest's real name. He participated in last year's anti-government protests in the city and is hiding his face for fear of repercussions from the government. Connor, welcome. What does the resignation of all of Hong Kong's pro-democracy lawmakers mean to you?
Well, I think the best time for their resignation has already passed, and the impact here now on the movement is minimal. So obviously, this move has tremendous news value. But if we look back on the movement, there has been multiple points in time when they could have done this. For instance, they could have done this along with the other localist candidates that also refused to participate in the Legislative Council. So that's an opportunity that they missed. So I think by now, their resignation now, it's more, to me anyway, it's more like they're being forced out of the council, and it's not their conscious choice to leave the council. And the effect on the movement in general, I feel, aside from the news value, is minimal.
What do you say to those people who say that these lawmakers being absent from the Legislative Council now is the death of democracy in Hong Kong? Do you see democracy as having died in Hong Kong?
Definitely, yeah. So to me, along with the rule of law, right, it's been dead for quite some time now. And it's just now that the people are beginning to see that it's been dead for quite some time. It's only because I think the public tend to have their hopes pinned on these more established pro-democracy or pan-democratic leaders before. And seeing them fall just shows them the end of the facade, that there is democracy and rule of law in Hong Kong. So yeah, it's just reckoning with the fact that it's been dead. Yes.
Where does that leave the pro-democracy movement in the city, a movement that you yourself participated in?
Domestic resistance has a lot more restrictions now than they used to, but it's still really pivotal to the movement in general. I think a major shift going forward would be a shift towards the world stage and the international stage, because obviously with a lot of the movement's leaders being exiled, most of the proponents have moved towards the international community.
But then going by your argument, that would suggest that within Hong Kong itself, there aren't any avenues left to protest or to stand up for democratic rights. Hence, it would appear that the democratic movement in Hong Kong itself is dead.
Right. So yeah, I don't think the movement's dead. It's just been the course has been changed, and a lot of the methods needs to be changed as well, along with changing times. Yeah. So it's not dead. It's just functioning in some other ways, I think. Domestic resistance.
What is the kind of domestic resistance you're talking about?
Right. So I've seen a lot of things being proposed by leaders of the movement. So two things that I've seen in the past couple of months, it's a push by a lot of grassroots forces towards the rebuilding of a Hong Kong economy, a more diverse Hong Kong economy, with the central planning and all that. Hong Kong, for the past 20 years after the handover, in that time frame, we have lost a lot of our domestic produce and domestic industry. We used to be innovative proponents in tech and manufacturing, but that's been dead for quite some time, and we are all putting everything into travel and financials. So I think seeing a grassroots push towards the revival of a Hong Kong culture and Hong Kong community, that's a way of resistance, yeah. So, yes, that's the main thing.
We'll leave it there for the time being, but thank you so much for speaking to us. Connor, speaking to us from Hong Kong.
Thank you.